Hello, hello. This is the thought for the day. And again, I'm reading from Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts, an amazing book. Seth is teaching Jane about the eternal validity of the soul. So he's been lecturing to Jane. Jane has been channeling Seth, and he's been teaching about past, present, and future. So I'm kind of picking up in the middle of this. So Seth says, not only are you part of other independent selves, each one focused in its own reality, but there's a sympathetic relationship that exists. For example, because of this relationship, your experience need not be limited to the physical perceptive mechanisms. You can draw upon knowledge that belongs to these other independent selves. You can learn to focus your attention away from physical reality, to learn new methods of perception that will enable you to enlarge your concept of reality and greatly expand your own experience. It's only because you believe that physical existence is the only valid one that it doesn't even occur to you to look for other realities. Such things as telepathy and clairvoyance can give you hints of other kinds of perception, but you are also involved in quite definite experiences, both while you are normally waking and while you are asleep. The so-called stream of consciousness is exactly that. One small stream of thoughts, images, and impressions that is part of a much deeper river of consciousness that represents your own far greater existence and experience. You spend all your time examining this one small stream so that you become hypnotized by its flow and entranced by its motion. Simultaneously, these other streams of perception and consciousness go by without your notice, yet they are very much part of you. And they represent quite valid aspects, events, actions, and emotions with which you are also involved in other layers of reality. You are as actively and vividly concerned in these realities as you are in the one in which your main attention is now focused. Now, as you are merely concerned with your physical body and physical self as a rule, you give your attention to the stream of consciousness that seems to deal with it, with the physical body and your physical self. These other streams of consciousness, however, are connected with self forms that you do not perceive. The body, in other words, is simply one manifestation of what you are in one reality. But in these other realities, you have other forms. You, quote unquote, you, are not divorced from these other streams of consciousness in any basic way. Only your focus of attention closes you off from them and from the events in which they are involved. If you think of your stream of consciousness as transparent, however, then you can learn to look through and beneath it to others that lie in other beds of reality. You can also learn to rise above your present stream of consciousness and perceive others that run, for analogy's sake, parallel. The point is that you are only limited to the self you know if you think you are, and if you do not realize that that self is far from your entire identity. Now, often you tune in to these other streams of consciousness without realizing that you have done so. For again, they are part of the same river of your identity, and all are therefore connected. Any creative work involves you in a cooperative process in which you learn to dip into these other streams of consciousness and come up with a perception that has far more dimensions than the one arising from the one narrow, usual stream of consciousness that you know. Great creativity is then multidimensional for this exact reason. Its origin is not from one reality, but from many. And it is tinged with the multiplicity of that origin. Great creativity always seems greater than its pure physical dimension and reality. By contrast with the so-called usual, it appears almost as an intrusion. It takes the breath away. Such creativity automatically reminds each man of his own multidimensional reality. The words "know thyself," therefore, mean far more than most people ever suppose. Now, in moments of solitude, you may become aware of some of these other streams of consciousness. You may at times, for example, hear words or see images that appear out of context with your own thoughts. According to your education, beliefs, and background, you may interpret these in any number of ways. For that matter, they may originate from several sources. On many occasions, however, you have inadvertently tuned in on one of your other streams of consciousness, opened momentarily a channel to these other levels of reality in which other portions of the self dwell. Some of these may involve the thoughts of what you would call a reincarnational self, focused in another period of history as you know it. You may instead pick up an event in which a probable self is involved, according to your inclination, your psychic suppleness, your curiosity, your desire for knowledge. And in other words, you may become aware of a far greater reality than you now know. Use abilities that you do not realize you possess. Know beyond all doubt that your own consciousness and identity is independent of the world in which you now focus your primary attention. If all of that were not true, I would not be writing this book, and you would not be reading it. So, as you go through the day, let your perception open just a little to some of those other selves. Ask yourself, when else have I lived? Who else have I been? What did I learn or do or see or feel or experience in those other times? And let some of the wisdom of that individual come to you. And make a great day.